Welcome back to the All Seasons channel. We're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm coming to you from my kitchen. It's a cold, wet, rainy Monday morning here in southern West Virginia. So we're going to have a discussion about our holding tanks in our RVs. So this is going to be titled Holding Tanks 101. Everything you need to know. What are your holding tanks? Where are they? And how to manage them. So here we go. We're going to learn about holding tanks today. So grab your pencil and paper and let's get to it. The first holding tank that we are going to talk about today is going to be your freshwater holding tank. Why does your RV have a freshwater holding tank? Well, that's a tank that you can put fresh potable water in and turn your water pump on in your RV, and the water pump will disperse the water through the water lines in the RV to your sinks and your bathroom sink, your kitchen sink, your shower, your water to flush your commode. Okay, why would you want to do that? Well, a lot of people, when they are traveling, they might want to stop and beside the road at a rest area or whatever, fix some lunch, maybe use the restroom, use their own restroom. Okay, so if you want to do that, if you want to be able to wash your hands, wash vegetables, use your own restroom, you're going to need to put water in your freshwater holding tank. You go to a national forest a lot of times, and they have unimproved sites for RVs, so you need to have your own water supply. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at a diagram, a very generic diagram of a freshwater holding tank. Your RV, every RV manufacturer does things a little bit differently, but your tank is going to have these basic components. You're going to have an inlet, a way to get the water in the tank, whether this gravity field, it's where you just stick a hose in a fitting on the outside of the camper, put water in here, or whether you hook your water hose up to the city fill fitting and turn a valve somewhere to put water in this tank. But anyhow, you're going to have some kind of inlet to get water in this tank. You're going to have a vent. The only thing you need to know about the vent is you need to make sure that it does not get crimped or plugged by insects or something. Bugs love to go in these little vent hoses and build a nest and stop it up. You're going to have an outlet to your water pump. The water pump is what you turn your water pump on, and it disperses water throughout your camper through the water lines to your sinks and your shower, the water to flush your commode. You're going to have a drain. Okay. Now, this tank can be mounted different ways in your RV. It can be mounted above the floor, or it can be mounted below the floor. If it is mounted above the floor and you are traveling and you want to put water in this tank so you can use it while you're traveling, you can pretty much fill this tank up, okay? Because the tank is sitting on the floor, okay? Not much danger of it going anywhere. If your tank is mounted below the floor, you really probably don't want to fill this while you are traveling much past halfway. How do you know how much water is in your tank? That is what your monitor panel is for. In your RV, somewhere, it's usually where they'll clump a lot of light switches, your water pump switch, all that. You have a monitor panel. You push the button for the freshwater tank, and it will tell you how much water is in your freshwater tank. The monitor panel for all of your tanks, the fresh, the gray, and the black. Sometimes you've got two gray tanks. So the monitor panel for the black tank, they're notorious for not reading correctly. Your tank just has these little probes. Once the water level reaches that probe, it turns the appropriate light on your monitor panel. Now, if just something sticks to one of those probes, some toilet paper or some solids, if it, it's not going to read properly until that comes off that probe. So now your freshwater tank and your gray tanks, your monitor panel typically works pretty well. Black tank, they're always a little bit iffy. Okay. So now your drain. Now if your tank is mounted above the floor, a lot of times you will have a drain right here on a drain pipe. This is usually just a short drain pipe, comes out of the tank, goes through the floor of the RV to the outside, the exterior of the RV. Sometimes you will have a drain right here. Okay. Sometimes it will come out, drop through the floor to the outside, and you will have either a valve or just a plug underneath the RV on the exterior. You'd have to lay down on the ground and either turn the valve or pull the plug off to drain this tank. Now, as far as managing this tank, you don't want to leave water in this tank for a long period of time. What's a long period? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to leave water in it for more than a couple weeks. Let's say you took a trip the first week of June, and your next camping trip is 4th of July weekend. Okay, don't leave water in that tank for a month. Okay. Now, if you had done a little camping trip the first week of June, you've got another camping trip the middle of June. Sure, you probably leave water in there, be just fine. Okay. But you just don't want to leave this water in this tank very long because it will get funky in a hurry. Okay. Most people nowadays don't drink water out of this tank, but you think about it, you still are going to take a shower, you're going to brush your teeth, stuff like that. So you may want to think about sanitizing this tank occasionally. They make little tablets or whatever, you just drop them in the tank and it sanitizes these water tanks. Okay, I think that is it on the freshwater holding tank. We're going to move on. The next holding tank that we're going to talk about is your water heater. Most people wouldn't consider this a holding tank, but a modern RV today, water heater will hold between 6 and 12 gallons of water. That's a lot of water, and you don't want this getting funky either. Okay. So just like your water in your freshwater holding tank, I wouldn't leave water in this water heater for more than a couple weeks. So if you have used your RV and it's going to be more than 2 weeks before you use it again, I would drain this water heater. Now, if your camper sets at your house and then it's plugged in or whatever, you want to turn if your water heater has an electric heating element, you want to be sure and turn that off. Now, there again, every RVs are a little bit different. Some of them will have usually near the monitor panel, but not always. Sometimes it's just all by itself. You'll have a switch for the water heater for the gas portion and another switch for the electric. You can cut that off. Some water heaters, the best way to do it is go into your panel box in the camper where all your AC breakers are at. Find the one that's marked water heater, just turn the breaker off. Okay. But anytime you drain this water heater, make sure you cut the heating element off, because if you drain the water heater while the heating element's on, or you plug the camper in and the heating element's on when the tank's empty, you'll burn that element out. It just takes a few minutes to do that. Okay. So if you're not going to use your water heater, your camper for a little while, and the water heater's got water in it, just pull the drain. Now you can go back and watch. I've done several videos in the past where I worked on water heaters, and I've showed you draining the water heater, or winterizing videos. I'll show you how to winterize or how to drain your water heater. Okay. Where to find the water heater? If you walk around the camper, you will find a door on the outside, and it will just be a square door. It's got an aluminum vent right here that lets the exhaust gases from the propane operation out. You'll have a little latch here. You twist that latch, fold the door down. You're going to see a bunch of other stuff in here, but the only thing we're concerned about is this drain plug on the bottom. Get the appropriate size socket, take that drain plug out, let that water out of that tank. Okay? I think that's enough about the water here. Let's move on. The next holding tank we're going to talk about is our gray tank. Now, a lot of your modern RVs have two gray tanks. There again, you're going to have to apply this to your RV. You may have one gray tank, you may have two gray tanks. So what is our gray tanks used for? Our gray tanks are our sinks, shower, washing machines if you have a washing machine. Okay? A lot of modern RVs will have two gray tanks. Some will be just a gray tank with the sinks and shower, and the other gray tank could be just a galley, which is just a kitchen sink, or I have seen a second gray tank for just a washing machine. There again, your RV is probably going to be different, but typical gray tank, you're going to have an inlet and an outlet. The inlet you're probably never going to see. The outlet is going to have a valve. It can be a 1.5 inch, it can be a 2 inch, or it could be a 3 inch valve. Okay, but you're going to have an outlet. The outlet can be all by itself. Okay, especially if you have two gray tanks. A lot of times one gray tank and the black tank will be wide together. The other gray tank, it may come out all by itself, or the second gray tank can also go into the same outlet. Sometimes you have one, the big 3 inch sewer outlet. Sometimes you have two. Your RV, you're just going to have to apply this to your RV. Okay, I'm just trying to teach you how to manage these tanks today. So, our gray tanks. Now, the gray tanks, of course, if you're traveling and stuff like that, the valve's going to be closed. If you are in a campground that has a sewer hookup, you can hook up your sewer hose from your fitting on the outside of the camper, put it in the inlet, the sewer inlet at the campground, or dump station, but I'm mostly talking about a campground. You can leave the valve open on your gray tank and just let things go. It's fine. Now you will want to manage these gray tanks with the black tank. We're going to go over that part of it when we get to the black tank. Okay. There's just not a lot to go over on the gray tanks really, because like I say, if you're traveling, clearly you're going to leave the valve closed. You're just going to let water build up in these tanks. You never want to let these tanks fill up completely if you're traveling. The black tank too. You never want to drive with your holding tanks full of water, okay? Because they're just not designed to bounce around full of water, okay? So keep that in mind if you're traveling. Keep these tanks, I would never let these tanks get over half full before you find a dump station somewhere to get rid of this stuff, okay? The next tank we're going to talk about is the black tank. What is the black tank? That is your commode water. Anything that goes in the commode goes in the black tank, okay? So we're going to talk about how you manage the black tank along with the gray tank here, okay? As far as managing the two together, it's not critical. I'm going to just tell you some little tips to make life a little bit easier by managing the two tanks together, okay? Your black tank, okay? You never want to use your RV with this valve open. You always want to keep this valve closed because you don't want what happens if you leave this valve open and you're using your RV. When you flush your commode, the solids, you know what I'm talking about, will just drop down in this tank and they'll stick a little bit, okay? And then you do it again, they stick a little bit again, and then they stick a little bit again, and they stick a little bit again. And before you know it, what will happen is when the water and the solids go in the tank, the water will just run off and leave the solids. And given enough time, what you'll end up with is a big pyramid of poo in your tank, because this tank's only about 5 to 8 inches deep, so it's not a lot. You do not want to get a pyramid of poo in your tank, okay? It's just bad news. If you want to see how we deal with that, go look at the last video I did and you'll see that. But so in order to avoid this pyramid of poo, that's why you leave this valve closed. You can put you'll always want to put some deodorant in your, drop it in the commode occasionally. You know, a lot of the RV chemicals are designed to eat up any solids in the tank, so use those things. Okay, they're all good, but just make sure you use stuff made for RV. Okay. All right. So now, when we're using our RV, we leave this valve closed until this tank gets, starts getting full. Say, 2/3 or better. All right. And there you can tell on your monitor panel, or once you've used your RV for a while, you'll just know. If you got a family of 5, it's gonna fill up quickly. If it's just 2 of you, or you're all by yourself, it's gonna fill very slowly. All right. Now, when we let this tank build up to 2/3 or better, all right, then we can pull this valve. It's a 3-inch valve, 3-inch pipe coming out of that tank, and everything will rush out quickly. Okay, and that way, you won't have any solids left in there. The water and the solids will just flush right out. Okay. Now, here's a little trick. Let's say that you are staying in a campground for a week. Okay, there's 4 of you, a couple kids. All right, you've had this valve closed on your black tank. All right, let's say you've had it closed for 3 days. All right, your tank's starting to get a little bit full. Say it's half full. Okay, now at that time you might want to close the valve on your gray tank. Now you will want to keep an eye on your monitor panel, make sure that this gray tank doesn't overfill on you, but let this gray tank get some water in it. When you dump your black tank, all your solids and water is going to come out, but you're going to have your flexible hose going to the campground. A lot of people call that the stinky slinky. I like it. So what you do, you drop your black tank, open the valve on the black tank. Now you might have some solids laying in here. Okay, then you open, once the black tank's done, then you open your gray tank. Okay, that'll help clean your tank. That will help clean your hose. Okay, so that when you get ready to leave and you go to get your hose and put it back in your RV, you don't suddenly find out that there was a bunch of solids in it that you just let go on the ground in the campground. Campground won't be happy with you. Neighbor won't be happy with you if you do that. Okay. Then once everything's empty, now a lot of your black tanks will have a flush. Okay, this is a pressurized water fitting. If your RV does have a black tank flush, you'll probably have a fitting on the outside of the camper wherever your other water fittings are at, and it'll have a little sticker that says this is a black tank flush, and it'll also say on that sticker, make sure this valve is open if you're going to use the flush. Okay, so after you've dumped all your tanks, all right, this valve on the black tank is still open. Then at that time you can hook that tank flush up, turn the water on it, and it'll help flush this tank out. Okay, don't ever leave a water hose hooked up to this flush. Okay, and don't ever close this valve and then turn this flush on. It just makes a mess. I've seen campers flooded. I've seen black tanks exploded, split. I've seen them swell up like a football and just fall out on the ground. I mean, don't do it. I always tell my customers, don't even leave a hose hooked up to that tank flush, because a lot of people will use a Y and have one water hose going to the city fill on the camper and the other Y going to the flush hose, and they'll leave that hooked up. Well, there's just a little valve here. You know, your valve's open on your one going to the city fill on the camper, and then let's say some kid just comes along, not being malicious, but just turns that valve on your flush. You don't know it. The valve's closed. All of a sudden, and 5 minutes later, you got a mess. Okay, so just don't even leave that hose hooked up. Okay, now we've dumped our tanks, we've left this valve open, we've flushed the tank, say for 10 minutes. Okay, cut your tank flush off, unhook that hose, come over here, close your black valve, close your gray valve. If you're going to close the gray valve, it depends on whether you're traveling or whether you're sitting in a campground. If you're sitting in a campground, just leave this one open, close your black valve, boom, you're done. So that is managing your holding tanks in your RV. Thanks for watching. As always, you know, if you find any value to my videos, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and we're going to go on to the next one, and you have a great day.